Hi, I'm Chris, and I'm a former member of a Korean cult named Shincheonji. And today I'm going to be interviewing Matt. He is from Perth, Australia. Matt, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I am also a former member of Shincheonji for the opportunity to speak out today.
Perfect. So, Matt, tell us more about the position you were in, how long you were involved with SEJ, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I was involved in SCJ since 2019 until TM.
Mm.
That comes to 4 years of my life being inside this group, which is quite a large impact on me as a young adult going through university and having those 4 years almost taken away. I was so heavily inside this group that everything, my whole lifestyle just became about SCJ for those 4 years. I was in as well,
Mhm.
starting from 2019. And because I was among the first group that was recruited in Perth, they worked me up to become what they call a center evangelist, which in simple terms is basically a homeroom teacher. So I eventually became someone that was a large in the group as well, because I was teaching a lot of their doctrine to newcomers and bringing
Mhm.
people in.
So, it sounds like you're pretty heavily involved over the last 4 years. And maybe there's someone in the audience, if they're freaking out, they have a loved one in this group, and they want to know, what does SEJ actually believe?
SCJ's core doctrine,
Mhm.
it's quite a large field to just pick out like a few particular things, because
Mhm.
all of their teaching comes together to almost encourage their main perspective, which is boiled down to just one simple statement, is that their South Korean pastor, Lee Man-hee, is the Messiah of the second coming. When I say Messiah, as in a person who is sent to bring salvation to all people.
Mhm.
And he claims it in a way that he is the person that Jesus is actually working through in spirit. And so he is basically the embodiment of Jesus' second coming. And he's the one who speaks this word of truth that's going to heal the whole world. All of Shincheonji's teachings are catered towards building up the members to believe that he is the Messiah. His Old Testimony, which he claims is the full book of Revelation.
Mhm.
22 chapters of Revelation are all about him.
Mhm.
All of the introductory teachings that Shincheonji begins to teach you in the very early stages of the Indoctrination,
Mhm.
building you up to, first of all, believe that their teaching is the best and
Mhm.
to very trustworthy, so that by the time that they start teaching you the revelation doctrine, you're already fully involved, and you're
Yeah.
just going to come believe that he is the harbinger of the second coming.
Yeah, he's like a prophet or a promised pastor in their terms who speaks on behalf of Jesus. And just to be clear, that also would imply that without Lee Man He, salvation is not possible, right? Because he's the one portraying the words of Jesus Christ, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's no salvation by grace. Shincheonji teaches that the grace of God is the fact that he gave us a chance of salvation by sending the promised pastor and
Mm.
by the word of Shincheonji. That's what they
Mm.
call grace. But it's entirely based on works, because you have to be someone that lives up to the standard of Lee Man Hee, and you have to continuously evangelize and recruit more people
Mm.
to become someone eligible to enter into Shincheonji, which they call the kingdom of heaven.
Okay, that's very interesting. So hopefully our viewers get what this group believes. Let's go back to 2019. How were you recruited? What drew you into this group? It sounds like it's a process, almost like a grooming process. Is that true?
Absolutely. They've got a number of different tactics that they use, which, if I reflect back to how I was recruited, I honestly think Shincheonji is highly effective with their recruiting strategies.
Mhm.
Very welcoming when you first join. The cult term for it is love bombing,
Mhm.
where you feel really special as you first enter the community, and you feel like you're making a lot of friends. You feel really trustworthy toward your teachers, and feel that you're building a stronger relationship with God. So that very first introductory stage of joining the cult group, or joining Shincheonji, is actually very comforting to enter. I
Mm.
can see why a lot of people would just completely miss all the red flags, like myself, in terms of how I was recruited. Like a lot of people in Perth, I was on my university campus and I was approached by one of the senior members. From the minute that we had that initial interaction, I had no idea that he was part of a church group or affiliated with some organization, because he just portrayed himself just as a university student that wanted to do a me. Even from the beginning, there's always that front out. So you just never know where. And for me, I just thought, okay, regular survey on the university campus, like no worries about that. And we spent 40 minutes just talking. What started off just like cultural things, which is very normal as a psychology student, but then you started getting into the topic of religion, and he was asking about Christianity and how spiritual I was and my relationship with God. To be completely, I wasn't that strong of a believer. I didn't know about the Bible. It was a thought of mine or a recent interest to start getting back into church. I almost felt like the whole meeting was something that maybe God had planned for me. I seemed friendly. He invited me to join youth gathering. The thing is, he didn't actually specify that it was a Bible study. He just said, oh, it's just like a youth gathering, and played it off as something very easy to come along to, very chill. I had no problems attending the first session, which ended up being a very intensive Bible study with a lot of scriptures being used.
This guy wasn't really upfront and honest about his real intention, but instead he was just like, hey, let's start off with basic normal questions, a innocent civic questionnaire. And then through that, it became a youth group get together. And then all of a sudden you're doing this more intense Bible study. How many days per week was this Bible study?
Yeah. So that's another thing, is they ease you into it. So it started off just something I thought was every so often, maybe once a week or once a month. After that first session, I could clearly see that it was a little bit more intense than I guessed it would be. And there was a lot of Bible study elements to it. At least 30 plus scriptures in that first 2 hours. I was like, okay, this is probably something that is much more well organized, and I would expect that it goes more frequently. After that, they invited me to come back the next week. But started off just going once a week. They wanted me to commit more of my time. I can quickly understand the Bible deeper. Went to 3 times a week. And after having done sessions with them 2 times a week for about 2 months, that the course, which is the main thing.
And then just to be clear too, they weren't upfront about who they were. They weren't like, hey, we're Shincheonji. We believe that Jesus returned in spirit and is working exclusively through Lee Man He. Is that correct?
Yeah, not at all. Thing to do with Korea or Shincheonji. And honestly, my teacher just played it off that he was like, I think that he said he was a marketing man. And he's just a little side hobby that he does. And he just arrived in Perth and thought, hey, like I want to do a little bit of missionary work. I'm going to come to the campuses and just teach you a little bit about the Bible. That's all I had.
Again, like I said earlier, they really groom you into this. And that's why, okay, so during the first few months, were there any cause for like red flags, especially for the teachings?
Yeah, 100%. Now reflecting back.
Yeah.
You just see red flags right from the beginning. But
yeah,
I just had such little education about cult groups. Even for people that do know a little about, actually really know the strategies of cult groups. And it's difficult to pick up on the red flags for Shincheonji because they're just so good at blending in with other mainstream Christian Bible study groups. I didn't on the red flags to begin with. I did feel that was more intense than I had anticipated. I never thought, oh, this is a weird.
Maybe you can bring up some of the manipulative tactics that CJ uses. You mentioned love bombing early on. Let's go ahead and flesh that out.
Yeah, I think love bombing is probably one of the biggest strategies that they utilize in the introductory stages. For me, the person that initially conducted that, now that I've gone through the whole thing, I can realize why that it was so important to him, because he would have taken a lot of notes about things that are of interest in my background, about my personality, and he things down, and then sends them off to his leaders, and they give them feedback on how to make him as a person. A lot of psychoanalyzing that's going on, and I can give an example of how they did that in the initial interview. the initial
Mhm.
that I was into music, for example. And then all of a sudden, in our very first Bible study session, there was a musician there offered me to play his guitar. I don't know 100% if that's
Yep.
is like that, but
Mhm.
they just already knew so much about me. The moment I walked in,
Mm.
all of them, and they were all recruiters. I thought they were university, but I realized they were all senior members of Shincheonji. They all got up, they greeted me, they complimented me, they were serving me food, they were offering me the guitar to play and just making me feel very comfortable. So that love for me was just happening from, and I thought, wow, this Christian group is so friendly. These are the type of people I love to hang out. And I just had no idea.
That's insane. And any normal average person wouldn't expect such a thorough level of everything you're saying and doing is being watched and reported on, especially for a get together in college or university. It's strange that this group claims to have the highest truth, and yet they're still using deceitful tactics. A wolf in sheep's clothing. Is that a similar experience with you as well?
Yeah, 100%. The strategies, of course, is continuous feedback from the perspective. They want to get feedback from all of the experienced members in Shincheonji on how they can bring this person in. Throughout the classes, I had buddy with me every class, arrived to class with me. He would leave the class with me, and he was always just observing me. So all of the things that how I interacted during the session, how I took notes, or how I would respond saying amen, and the scriptures were being read. All those things he would make note of. And then those things are now being reported to the experienced members. He's getting feedback from them. And then not only that, but the teachers are now aware of my status in the class. Like, oh, if Matt was sleepy during that class, okay, we need to talk about sleepiness in the next class so that he needs to wake up and feel more guilty if he starts feeling sleepy. So there's a lot
Wow.
of management going on with English. I think that's why it's so effective in catering for all of the newcomers in the classes, because they've all got these spies sitting with them and just making note of every little move and reporting it to the student.
That's interesting because sometimes I talk with people outside and they say, even from my own experience, how can you fall for it? And I'm like, here's the very well thought out research that this group does against you. They really try to list out your weaknesses. In the Seattle branch I was in, they called it buying someone's field. Hey, you like music? Okay, I personally am a nerd. I don't care about music. So I'll get one of my music buddies in the group to get paired up with you. Get me a guy who's into tech and video games, and I'm his best friend. And that's what at least they taught me. And I'm sure it's a similar experience with you. That's insane.
Your personality.
One of my favorite novels is George Orwell's 1984, which talks about all the internal reporting and spying. So looking back on it and just hearing what you're saying, it just reminds me of that novel. It's crazy. So you go through the class, they reveal the big reveal normally for me was at the end. I'm sure it was the same for you. What was that moment like when you realize, oh, this guy was basically lying to me the entire time? How was that process like for you?
In that moment, I didn't feel much, and that's because of the indoctrination.
Sure.
That's why Shincheonji won't reveal their identity to the newcomers until 8 months after having done 8 months worth. And that is when they reveal a little bit more about who they are. So they'll reveal, oh, by the way, we're going to let you know something big. Right? There are recruiters in this room. They wouldn't use the term recruiters. There are senior members in this room that have been helping you to get up till this point. And then they'll slowly introduce, like, step by step, a little bit more about who they are. They'll let you know that they're from South Korea, the Shincheonji church, and they have promised pastor, but they won't mention a lot of in Michael Trap. They start telling you all about promised pastor. And so they slowly introduce a little bit by little bit. But by that point, by the 8-month mark, most members who have stuck around for that long are still indoctrinated because of all the teachings that they're using until that. You've already been studying 3 times a week. Most people probably 6 times a week now because they're making you rewatch every class. And that's part of the indoctrination is you've got to continuously listen to the teaching and write reflections and send it to the teacher. So there's like homework for that. So already the amount of your mental capacity is now being filled up with how much time you have to reflect on the teaching.
Right.
And the teaching itself is also composed of a lot of teaching that is very emotive and very fearful. So in one class, for example, Satan works in a way that he is going to target you through your friends and family and social media. If you really are serious about your faith, and if you're closer to God and you want to be successful in keeping God's holy covenant and entering heaven, you want to be careful around friends. And then the next class will introduce strategies on how to do that. So now you already start isolating your sources of information. You start, you start focusing almost with a tunnel vision, just focusing on the teaching, right? So every class is designed in some way that they want to shape you more into a member that is going to be devoted to them, that is going to isolate yourself to only just focus on them. So that by the 8-month mark, when you've already isolated everyone. You haven't told anyone that you're doing Bible study. You've isolated yourself from social media, and you're already believing what they're saying, that this is the authority, this is the teaching of God. And so when they say we are Shincheonji, you're not going to look it up on the internet. You just take it and, wow, this must be heaven. This is what God wanted to reveal.
So there's definitely a lot of like phobia indoctrination where from day one all the way to the end of the 8-month period for you, just constantly being drilled into you. Anything or anyone that contradicts that we say is of the devil. And so it's funny because my experience with SCJ and even the current members is they try to paint themselves as if they're very logical and well reasoned. But at the same time, they tell you to be like the Berean Jews of Acts 17:11. And on the flip side, if someone contradicts their narrative or theology, it must be because they're from Satan and have 7 evil spirits working through them. So they set up this false dichotomy where there's no possibility that they're wrong. Even if you've shown them why they're wrong, it must be because you're Satan incarnate, basically.
There's no other plausible explanation to it. Either you belong to Satan or you belong to God. Cult-like strategy of making this us and them mindset or ideology. Anyone who is outside of us is of evil nature, is of the evil spirit, is of Satan's spirit. And anyone who is with us is beloved by God. The most passionate of the members around us are the most loved by God.
Yeah, and this is also very helpful for parents or family and friends who have a loved one who got sucked into this group. This is the mindset an SCJ member may have. So let's go ahead and continue on with your journey. So you joined the group. You're there for about 4 years. You're an evangelist, and it sounds like you're wholeheartedly committed to SCJ. Like, so what caused you to begin to doubt? Because obviously you're out of it. How did that journey happen?
It's an interesting one because I would say my initial doubting phase started probably 2 years. So I would say it's quite early. The 4 years, I already started to have these thoughts about, like I've heard about another church in Korea. Like I've heard similar in nature to Shincheonji. When I go online and search the name of that church, it's the WMS, or commonly known as Mother God. So I'd heard that they're also from South Korea. Member size was way bigger than Shincheonji. And even though they started roughly around the same era. So I was thinking to myself, like, how did they get so big if we have the ultimate teaching that is going to be a worldwide domination? Why is that church growing faster than we are? And that was like a thought that sparked my initial doubt. I was never really voicing that doubt. I never felt a platform where I can express that. And it's because a lot of the time you are engaging with the Shincheonji doctrine, they are teaching you that doubts and negative thoughts towards the organization is coming from. We should actually be careful of our own spirit if we start having thinking processes like that. So every time I would have that doubt or negative thought, I'm thinking, Satan's attacking me. I got to just ignore it. I got to just not think about it for the last remaining 2 years that I was inside. But as a member, I would say I was still very passionate. Like it was only minor negative thoughts. I was still very passionate. I was willing to work hard every day and be sleep deprived just trying to fulfill all the tasks that they were giving me and evangelize more people. But it was actually in the end, thanks to my parents' intervention, when they finally figured out what I was doing through the local Perth newspaper, and they started to intervene.
Okay, so raising awareness is actually a powerful tool. You don't have to get into all the details, but how did your parents intervene? How did they help you?
Yeah, 100%. Because I know intervention can also be really tricky. Yeah, in terms of the perspective of a Shincheonji member while you're inside, you are so fearful of your parents finding out. Because what Shincheonji is telling you all the time is they're going to attack you, they're going to persecute you, their love is going to persecute you. They're going to persecute you, and that's just evidence that Satan is working. You got to be very careful. And they do these things called persecution education, where they prompt you on how to respond in the event that how you can hide your involvement, or how you can remain calm, try to drag it on. And so we had a lot of those educations, basically shaping our perspective on our parents. Number one, that they are Gentiles because they don't know the teaching. They are Satan's going to use them. And number two, if they do, because our faith is so strong, which we're called the overcomers, they would always make us shout, overcomer, and we will overcome the persecution. So when my parents did initially, I felt like I was prepared for it. That they're with the new thing. And are you part of this church? I had just had so much suppression of my emotion. Just gone. I believe that is the truth. And this is where my faith lies. And so my parents are sitting there utterly distraught because they just realized that their son is a part of a cult and has been a part of a cult for 4.5 years. And I'm yeah, this is what I'm okay with lying to you about it. And so their intervention went over the span of 6 weeks, trying everything that they could. Mum and dad bought the book that was written by the cult expert Stephen. Read from cover to cover, the one that's called Combating Cult Mind Control. Started actually realizing all of the psychology behind how cults can control your mind, and put some ideas on the table about the psychology, which I think in particular started to intrigue me because as a psychology student, I'm always interested in the mind works. So when she started mentioning mind control, I was like, when they tried to argue the doctrine, that just was so ineffective because they do this thought stopping, and you have all these verses, the Shincheonji verses that they love to use, that's going through your mind and almost just barricading any other teaching from coming in. It was the psychology, the mind control, which is a highly research model on how cult groups are able to take over the mind, come out. Because in that 6th week, when I eventually went online and researched, the first thing I researched was mind control. And then there was all of this research by Stephen Hassan and a whole history of these different cult groups who all use the exact same strategies. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I've been played before.
No, that's really powerful. Like, even for myself, just hearing the testimonies of former members of different groups with the psychology. I remember this other girl from Seattle. She got sucked into the World Mission Society Church of God. Hearing her testimony and how she was overworked, sleep deprived, all that, it shook me to my core realization. Okay, that sounds really similar. It was on Great Light Studios. So that's awesome to hear that your mom was, of course, it sounds like she was gentle about it too. She wasn't super pushy, was she?
No, my parents were back and forth between should we be supportive of him or should we be aggressive? We're going to make him realize that he's brainwashed, that he's mind controlled. They would try different things. Sometimes they would allow me to just speak and they would just be supportive and they would just listen. And other times they would be more assertive and emotive and really try to tell me, Matt, you're in a group that is taking over your life. If you stay there, you're going to lose the rest of your life to them. And what you're experiencing is not normal. And so they would go back and forth. And I would say that a combination of both of them is what really helped. Them allowing me to speak and just be supportive and listen helped me to actually articulate something that was honest. For the first time in 4 years, I had just been lying to them straight up, and now I'm actually telling them what the doctrine, telling them who this organization or what this organization is all about. And then, but them also being more emotional and with showing this is how they are so frustrated and they're just so desperate to get me to realize. That actually did eventually start to, I would say, start to touch my heart. Their raw emotion. I started to feel like, wow, this is really actually, this is, it's really actually psychological because they're so desperate for me to realize something. The combination of both of those things is what helped me to eventually understand about it.
Then in 6 weeks, you begin researching mind control. And then what really helped you like unravel more about a CJ? Like anything about their doctrines or fulfillment?
Yeah, the doctrine aspect is a really difficult one. I would say it takes probably the longest for a lot of the ex-members that have come from Shincheonji. I guess because the scriptures have to spiritually abuse and manipulate that person, kind of trust towards scriptures is just diminished.
Right.
I don't even check which part of the doctrines were wrong. I just want to get.
Yeah.
Me, I felt a little bit like that. I felt like I still was compelled by the doctrine. I think the doctrine was really meaningful. It was the most meaningful teaching that I've ever be compelling. But at the same time, that a history of well-researched cult strategies to manipulate people in the same way that all these other cult groups are. So how can you possibly trust the doctrine? But in terms of breaking down, okay, this is where the doctrine's flawed. This is how the Bible's being misused. That took a while for me to unpack, watching some other ex-members who were like teachers inside the group who actually explained why the doctrine. Yes, the biggest one is the revelation doctrine being completely about Lee Man-Keane's test.
It's like, it's a revelation of Jesus Christ. An SCJ member will say, oh, we're only talking about Jesus here. It's, no, if you objectively look at all the titles Lee Man-He takes for himself, it's all about the new John, which is Lee Man-He. So yeah, it's, even for myself, looking back on it, how absurd that all is. It really is a way of idolatry. They say he isn't God. He's only a prophet or a promised pastor, more accurately, on behalf of God and Jesus. But essentially what they're saying is anything that he says goes.
Yeah.
It's like questioning him is like questioning the words of Jesus. So you better not. Yeah. Definitely. No, they're on the same page with that one. I think for me personally, it was definitely a Revelation 7 change. How it used to be 144,000 first selected, then after this Great Tribulation, now it's happening in parallel. I'm curious, did anything like that kind of help you? Because each person is different also.
Yeah, I know of ex-members that came because of doctrine change specifically. With him, and he said something, and then a year later or 2 years later, he just completely changed his viewpoint on it. I still remember because I was inside when he first mentioned the 144,000 was happening now. That was during the COVID. They call it the COVID era when COVID was. Lee he made this announcement that this is the time of Revelation said 144,000. God is gathering the 140,000 kingdom of priests. I remember that night so distinctly because I actually threw up. I was so anxious by the announcement. I was like, I cannot believe second coming is happening. A year went by and there was no 140,000. And 2 years went by and there was still 140,000. Then he starts saying, actually, it happens gradually and the great multitude one is happening at the same time. And it was like, that's not what you said 2 years ago. And so it definitely, probably equally as much as I thought about Mother God, like it was that other little question that I just tend to suppress them. I just didn't allow those thoughts to come to the top of my brain.
And it's interesting because when you read their books, even like the physical fulfillment of Revelation, it does plainly say the order of Revelation 7. And then the opposite happened where Great Tribulation, no 144,000 selected. They may say there's an arbitrary 144,000, but they're unable to say who it is. So SCJ always loves talking about the fulfillment and the who, what, where, when, why. But when he asks them, okay, so who are the 144,000 that caused the Great Tribulation, for example, or whatever, they're unable to say it. So for me, that was definitely one of the shattering moments of something's off about this group. But like you, I also suppressed it for at least another year. So I totally understand where you're coming from. Okay, so it sounds like your mom and dad had a big influence, and it really is just listening to you, caring about you, but also being honest and frank with you as well. It's like a combination of both. That's awesome to hear. So then after leaving SEJ, when did you leave again? Like pretty recent or?
Yeah, it was January this year.
You've definitely been busy. And I know that not only you, but a lot of other ex members throughout Australia have been raising a ton of awareness. Do you mind sharing what that journey has been like?
I would say that the first couple weeks of me leaving was very distressing. And that's because I was still going back and forth between leaving, kind of, am I going to lose myself? And so I was still struggling quite a lot. But at the same time, I felt that I had reached quite a substantial amount about the psychology. I was quite convicted in my choice that this group is, and it's actually really harmful to a lot of not only the people inside, but when because after leaving, I started seeing the families that their moms and dads just so utterly distraught and crying over the fact that they've lost their son or daughter to this group and for years. I almost felt this like a moral obligation, so to speak, to really try to at least reach out to the students or the people that I myself like brought. So I was just trying to contact people and just trying to call. But within the first week of leaving, they had blocked me. And I guess that is the SCJ excommunicate technique to isolate ex-members completely and just have nothing to do with it. Which is also really saddening because I felt that a lot of my friendships had been formed in there. And now
Right.
friends have put me off and they view me as this evil person and they can. That was the distressing, just having to come to terms. Okay, I've lost these friends. But I guess that also fueled me even more to want to do some awareness of the outside and try to get people out as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
The first thing that I did was to try to establish a support network in Perth. There wasn't really a big ambition or an end goal. We just made a Facebook group chat and it was like 5 of us, 5 ex-members. We all just reconnected when it had lunch together. It was so good and we all got to share about how we all left. Then I started to think there's actually a lot of other ex-members that I've forgotten about over the years. And we started reaching out to them. Some people actually left at the same time as me. And I was like, they're going to need support. Some of them internationally don't even have their family. With other people who have gone through a similar experience. And so this support group just started to grow. When we saw how effective it was, and I was like, wow, this is really important. We started gathering together and sharing each other's testimonies. The relief that came from other ex-members was, I started to notice that members had suppressed what had happened to them for maybe even years, and they just didn't even tell their friends and family. And I was like, wow, that can be really hard for a person. So having that little support group was really good for just allowing people to. It was a very casual thing, and I didn't want it to be a controlled environment. It was just simply a place where people can feel safe. And as news kind of spread, more news journalists started to hear about the group. Can we article and
Wow.
about it? Then pastors started to hear about it, and they started inviting ex-members to come talk at the churches. And news journalists on TV contacting radio specialists started contacting us. And so it just became this big news coverage.
So it's just like a natural effect of just you wanting a healthy community, to boil it down. And then it just naturally snowballed. Whenever I look up SEJ, a bunch of news articles from Australia, particularly, always shows up on the first page of Google. And I know for a fact that makes SEJ very upset, alongside the existential threat that they have against the subreddit, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's pretty awesome. I really appreciate you also admitting, hey, the first few weeks was hard. And you already touched on this. Okay. So you reached out to other ex-members, built out that community, and then you were really convicted by what you researched, especially on the psychology. What else did you do to overcome? You might as well use SEJ's term, to overcome that initial feeling of shock of, wow, the thing I dedicated X amount of years to was a lie.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a couple things I would say with that.
Okay.
Even for me now, like I still feel triggered by small things, or I guess like I'm still worrying certain
Right.
elements have affected me. For example, maybe as a little bit of a PTSD element.
Yeah.
Just driving around the city, and I remember this spot where I had this great moment with the phone.
Mhm.
That can just lower my mood, and it's just
Yeah.
can be really depressing to think back on. There's parts that I miss, obviously,
Mhm.
and then there's also the element of having to reconnect with old friends, and that is also a little bit depressing because you
Yeah.
just lost so much relationship time over those years. Yeah, those two things are things I'm working through. On top of that, there's the whole doctrine thing. Going to church, I often feel very distrusting. All
Yeah.
the pastor's intentions of which I understand, like that's going to take time as well.
Yeah.
But I would say the most important thing to me was to be open and honest about it as much as we to acknowledge, okay, this is what has happened to me. To, this is these are my feelings at this moment, and I need support. So not just suppressing everything, but actually being transparent about it. I think that is a very helpful therapy for me. And on top of that, finding a pastor that I personally trust and
Wait.
sitting with that pastor and just going through the teaching, showing him how it was taught,
Mhm.
and hearing his perspective on what is actually more healed and he, so I can move through the doctrine a bit.
And not only that, I just want to let like maybe our viewers know who are on the fence or recovering, whatever. I was involved with an SCJ Bible study for a year. Mine was 12 months and yours was about 8 months. And I was multiple days a week, multiple hours per session. It's not going to be an overnight one stop shop. What helped me was basically realizing what we were talking about earlier about how Revelation in the New Testament was very Lee centric. And they really shifted it from Jesus Christ. That's at least from a Christian theological point of view. And that is a pretty easy way to help deconstruct the teachings of SEJ. And I understand SEJ will absolutely deny this. But again, that's why in Lehman He's own books, it says the 27 books of the New Testament all are talking about the new John and promised pastor. Is there anything else you want to add on to this?
Oh, yeah, I suppose a lot of like, first of all, thank you
Yeah.
for sharing and
Mhm.
that these podcasts widespread impact that made more aware, but also
Yeah.
as members are the group that they can watch these videos and help them find some kind of resolution. Become very confident. What I'm saying is something that the members in IGTG are being taught against. I wanted to say to all the members that if they're watching this video that, you know, there is a lot of answers that are well thought out and actually are things that are not taught by the Shincheonji leadership and the Shincheonji admin. The psychology behind fault mind control and history of cultic movements and coercive control and cultic strategies are something that never documented in the group. It's never spoken. That there is such extensive literature that is very empirically backed up with so much evidence over the years. I just really hope that you can just take the time to look into mind control and then step by step understand that there is so much error, there's so much flaw in the doctrine, especially when it comes to revelation. You get to understand why this group has taken over basically the minds of.
Again, thank you, Matt, for your time. I have a feeling we'll probably do a follow up episode in the near future, but if not, we'll see. Thank you again for doing this, especially since we're on opposite ends of the world. It's one thing I'll say is even though you're in Australia and you're in a completely different tribe from me, I feel like what you went through was almost identical to what I went through. Even ex members of different cults, I guarantee that they probably have a very similar experience. The well documented psychology of indoctrination, it's both fascinating and terrifying. So thank you for your time again. And all right. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Matt, is there a way, maybe like an email or something, maybe I can add it to the description of this video that people can get a hold of you or anything of that nature? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's anyone that wants to reach out to discuss further.
All right, I'll definitely add your email to the description of this video. All right, guys. All right. Hey, thank you again for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time.